I'd like to welcome to the stage our next panelists for the panel called Going Phygital. And I'd like to welcome Seth Goldstein, the founder of Bright Moments. He's pleased to join us. Ryan Wilson, ThankYouX, artist. And Sarah Meyohas, for a panel that will be moderated by Stefanie de Regel, who's head of development at Taex. Over to you, Stefanie.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Is the mic working? Yes, it is. So, third panel, 3 speakers. Very excited to be here. And yeah, let's get into it, shall we? So, community, a very important word in the digital space, as you all know. A term that refers to people feeling like they have a shared sentiment, right? Shared values, maybe a shared mission. In the pandemic, it became even more important. Unprecedented surge of community building. We saw a lot of interesting projects come to life. Now, post-pandemic, what's happening? Is it still that important to do everything online? Or do we as humans really feel the need to also connect in a physical way, right? In the real world? And how do we combine those worlds and what kind of communities flow from that? So, which brings me to the topic of the panel, Going Phygital, how hybrid works creates new communities for digital art. What do we think of the word phygital? Sarah?
We don't like it.
We don't like it. Tell me why.
It sounds like a Beanie Baby or something, a kid's toy. It's a Phygital, with a Lunchable. So it really kind of feels like it lowers the category. I think that we should clear having a distinction between digital and physical. I think that distinction puts what we might traditionally just call digital art, we'll just call it digital art, into basically a ghetto of the art world, which has happened to other art forms. I would argue, I come from a photography background, and when I was in grad school, there was always in the way you talked about it, oh, are you an artist? Are you a photographer? An artist working in photography? Because if you're just a photographer, you're not part of the capital A art. And that is the risk that can happen to digital art. And so I think the distinction, we should just erase it.
Okay, well noted. Ryan, what do you think?
I basically 100% agree. In 2021, I was putting like screens inside paintings and kind of like blurring the lines of, is this a digital piece now because there's a digital element, but it's physical? Like, what is it? And I did not want to call it phygital, and I refer to them as hybrid pieces. So that's kind of like what I've been calling them, and a lot of other people I feel like have been calling them. So that's the word I use, yeah.
Seth?
Yeah, I don't like the word much either, but I think we're stuck with it.
Yeah.
It evokes this kind of discomfort, which I think is kind of the point, which is like there's tension between these two worlds and they're coming together, and it's not physical and it's not digital, it's something else. I think in the world of like meme coins, like just the word stick, memes stick, and phygital is what we've got, and the fact that Basel is now talking, it's jumped the shark a little bit.
It's like if you give yourself a nickname, it never sticks. But if someone else comes up with it, it like can't go away. That's how I feel this is, yeah.
Fair enough. So you both are artists, but Seth, you have a very interesting project. You call yourself a curator and also the creator founder of Bright Moments. Could you explain us what Bright Moments is?
So Bright Moments, it's a group of artists and curators and technologists, and we came out of Venice Beach kind of during the pandemic, 2021. And I think there was, for all of us, a feeling of being stuck in the pandemic and being stuck behind screens and all this digital collecting, and NFTs as a kind of file format was a major unlock. And I think what we felt is, why not create a physical gallery in Venice Beach for digital objects. And we put up some screens, and the timing was such, and we got lucky in a lot of different ways, and we started giving away generative art NFTs called crypto Venetians that were minted on art blocks for free to bring people to this gallery. And I think what we touched on, a couple people I know in the audience were there early on. What we touched on was really a kind of chocolate peanut butter moment where, you know, and I think Pablo was talking about this before, but making these ephemeral digital transactions somehow visceral and physical and experiential and social is really powerful, particularly when people were stuck in the pandemic and they couldn't go out. And with generative art in particular, and we're seeing this with generative AI, the work is generated on the spot. And so our tagline became "Where art is born," kind of with an emphasis on where, like there's a location. And so when you generate art in the form of NFTs that people own in person, it's got that sort of Sorcerer's Apprentice moment. And so we went on over the next 3 years to mint close to 30,000 NFTs in person across 10 different cities to kind of complete our roadmap. And I can talk more about that later.
Which is a pretty large community you created by traveling the world like that.
Yeah, it was a kind of a
I
carnival.
also want to jump in and say that, like, as someone from LA, it became kind of like this hub of like, we're going to Bright Moments tonight or something. Like it just became like one of the Web3, like before I think we even referred to it as Web3. Like, oh, you're going to that NFT digital gallery, like, yeah. And then it brought a ton of people who weren't into digital art into that spot, which was interesting.
And now you have a project in Art Basel in the Convention Center, which is really interesting because I saw an excerpt of a video that you guys put out with Sasha Stiles, where you read a poem that was created by Sasha Stiles. For those who don't know Sasha, she literally fed her body of work, created during a lifetime of verse and prose, so the poetry, to AI, which then created a sort of alter ego of her work, an AI poet that is now feeding back to her and to us, the audience and the world, AI-written poetry. And then, so back to you, Seth, and your project. So that was what you were reading out loud, and then we saw that on a screen. Could you explain?
It's an art computer called a Dream Zero, and there's an edition of 10 of them we're selling for the first time, and it's like an AI installation in a box, and you plug in the computer, and we're showing this installation. You talk to the microphone, and it renders what you're saying very fast, almost like it's listening to your thoughts. And so that's what Sasha was reading into. It's right above the West entrance. If you go to the main convention center, you don't need a badge or anything. Just go in the West Center, room 206, and you can experience it until Sunday.
Great, we will. And Sarah, are you showing at Art Basel something phygital, digital, physical?
Well, it starts with digital footage, but I'm showing holograms, and holograms are very physical, though they have inspired a lot of our digital worlds. So holograms, there are 2 holograms. One is in the booth of Marian Boesky Gallery at F12, and the other one, which is the more spectacular one, is in the Meridian section of the fair, which is where galleries apply for larger scale pieces. And it's a fragmented female nude in these glass shards. And the thing to know is that the glass is actually not plugged in at all. It's a piece of glass that has an emulsion on it of silver halide particles, and then when the light hits it at the right angle, it recreates a light wave. The way it's linked to the digital is that I'm actually making a hologram. I might lose some of you. I'm making a hologram of a wavefront that is from a stereogram, and that is made from 35 millimeter film, but before the 35 millimeter film, we are shooting digitally and shooting the subject moving from 1/3 of the frame to the last third of the frame and creating 90 frames and making the wavefront out of that. So it starts digital, but it ends up extremely physical, and not only extremely physical, but it has no dependencies in the sense that which is something that I have dealt with sometimes with digital work. In 300 years, you take the glass out of the box, you shine a light at it, and it works. So I'm not reliant on any updates. The record is in the glass.
I started with the present to actually go back to the past. I find it very interesting that you are saying this now because I know you from a very tech-savvy name, I find, Bitcoin, right? Early 2015, which is very Web3. So can you explain? I like that because I think a lot of people tend to put artists in boxes. It's digital, it's physical, it's this, but no, actually there's a whole range of things you have done. Could you explain us about Bitcoin?
Yeah, Bitcoin was in 2014, I forked Bitcoin, called it Bitcoin. I was very inspired by Bitcoin. The entire world has been since. I was just thinking today, I was like, if only I had as many Bitcoins as I do Bitcoins. But it was, I recognize that currency is very much a representation and it's an idea. And if there is the ability for cryptography to underpin digital currency, that this was massively revolutionary. And I thought it would be the ultimate performance artwork to make a currency. And so I did that and then realized, it was like, oh, well, this is not going to have any value because I'm not innovating technically. So I had to back it by my photography, which I did, by these images that I called speculations that were visual metaphors of a blockchain. And so that was the very first iteration of Bitcoin, which I then moved on to Ethereum with a giant performance piece called Cloud of Petals that was a labor of photographing 100,000 rose petals in the former Bell Labs to train an algorithm, train an AI. This was in 2016. So again, taking the trends of reality and really accelerating them into the future to return them and show you like kind of what is going to happen.
Coming back to community, those are two completely different communities, like now showing here in Miami with the work we just saw before and then this work. So how do you navigate with those different communities, and are those sometimes the same people or completely different, and how do you interact with them and how does that work?
It's different people. Interestingly, the collectors of my work who buy the physical pieces like the holograms, which are also much more expensive because they're so intensive to produce, I actually don't talk to them at all and they don't talk to me, and in fact I don't think they actually want to talk to me in a way that's amazing. Like there was one collector, he was so cool, and I ran into him in a gallery and I was like said hi and he was excited to talk to me, and then I was like, oh, we could meet up, and he was like not interested, and I was like, great, fine. And I actually think that that's really powerful too, because you're communing through the work. And I know that this man is seeing my work every single day. And that is better than like chatting with me. And so there's some people like that, and that feels amazing as an artist, versus other people who are just there to chat with you. And it's like, like you are taking up my air. But yes, the Web3 community is much more actually about community in this crazy way. And there's such beauty in that as well. So it goes both ways.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. ThankYouX also, what's interesting is that what you were talking about nicknames, to come back to that part. Your artist name, how did it come about? Why are you called ThankYouX?
Well, I came from doing more like the graffiti street art world, and I didn't mean to ever have a name. I was just putting up this tribute to Andy Warhol, and I would write "thank you" underneath it. And then I signed it with an anonymous X. I had a full-time job. I was an art director for a merchandising company, and didn't want to get caught or anything. So I just put an X. And then different art blogs at the time, this is way before Instagram, started like referring to me as ThankYouX. And at first I saw it and I was like, what the like hell is this? Like ThankYouX? And I don't even know what that like means. And then I was like, yeah, it's kind of weird. It's not bad. Better than X. You know, I was like, I don't even, and I wasn't even trying to like start a thing. I was just doing it on the side because I was needed fulfillment, like again, because like I was just stuck doing other people's work all the time for doing art direction. And yeah, it just stuck. I looked on thankyouX.com and it was available. And I was like, oh, I guess that's my name.
So the community literally co-created your name.
Yeah,
I
and I think like it kind of came from this like place of gratitude. Like I wanted to pay tribute to Warhol at the time because it was like I had this moment where I was like, oh, this person's just ripping off Warhol. This is, you know, they're using Warhol's colors scheme. This guy's doing Warhol's business model. And then I was like, everyone rips off Warhol in some way, whether they like understand it or not. And I was just like, so I just wanted to like say thank you to him for what he did for that, even though he's like a complete weirdo, whatever. But like, yeah, he opened up a lot of doors for artists. And so I just said thank you. And then,
And so are you now focusing more on like hybrid works or purely digital? What is now happening in the space?
all of it. I think digital, physical, everything I do. It's funny because you were saying that it starts as a digital piece always. Mine's the complete opposite. It always starts as a painting, and then I bring it into digital, and then sometimes I'll bring it back out in a different form, and it's like then the physical becomes something that I couldn't have made myself at like a painting. It's like a painting mixed with code or a painting mixed with 3D, and now it's like kind of like almost like a wall sculpture or something like that. So all of it, but it always starts as a physical. But the hybrid kind of pieces that I do are still a focus. I don't know if they're, that's just a painting, but the hybrid pieces I do, I would say, aren't my main focus because I really try to keep those like limited. And so I do like I take a long time to make those ones and I release them very, very slowly because I don't want those to become just kind of like this like thing that happens over and over again a ton of times. And they are more special, yeah.
But the work you had last year in Miami with Action Gallery, where you have literally the NFT, like the digital work in the oil on canvas, how was there, like, who were the collectors for that? What community was that? And how did the people that were collecting your NFTs before react to that? Was there like kind of like same question as with Sarah, merge of the two, or does it keep strictly separate?
Like, honestly, it's both. Like it's interesting because when it shows with a more traditional gallery, they're bringing in people who are like, oh, I've heard of NFTs, but they don't understand it or maybe don't like it. But then they're like, well, but it's a painting. And so it's kind of just like, it's two languages in one almost. And so like, depending on who's seeing it, if it's like a digital side, they're like, oh, this is a digital, but oh, that's cool. It comes with this physical. And so it's kind of both, to be honest with you. It just depends who's showing it, I think, really, and who's speaking the language to their own community, I think. So like when they were showing it last year, it's like that good. Like they've sold them to people who I'm their first and maybe only NFT ever. Like we're helping them set up like a MetaMask wallet and making sure they have like, you know, their seed phrase written down somewhere and like before I transfer them the NFT. And yeah, and then obviously like, you know, the crypto community has been very supportive. It's funny because early in 2021, when I first started doing it, I was already in the NFT space for like 6 months, but then I was doing like a solo thing where it's like, this is ThankYouX work. It's not a collaboration. It's like my art. And I was like, I want it to be physical. I was like, I want to do a show. I didn't want to call it like a drop. And this, I was like, this is like, you know, what I would envision as like a pitch deck for like a museum show kind of. And so a lot of collectors at that time were DMing me being like, you shouldn't do this. Don't do physical work. Like we're only digital. We only care about digital now. This is all we care about. And I was like, all right, well, thanks anyways. I'm going to do this even if it fails because this is really like the branch of my tree. I'm not trying to plant a new tree. And I just believed in it. And then it kind of slowly ended up working. So, yeah.
So it was met with a bit of controversy from...
Absolutely. At first, it was like meant with like hesitation from a lot of people.
Interesting. Seth, I wanted to talk to you about a specific project with Xerox Dev Beef. Could you tell us a bit more about that? We have the slides.
Yeah, it's called hash marks.
Hash marks.
Yeah, well, there it is. Yeah. So, Def Beef is an amazing programmer, musician, and kind of blockchain artist, and he's based in Toronto, outside of Toronto. And when we went from Venice Beach, we went to New York, and then we went to Berlin. And every stop, I would reach out to him and say, "We'd love to do something with you." We went to London, we went to Mexico City. He wasn't ready to do something in Mexico City, and we went to Tokyo after that. After Tokyo, our next, I think it was city number 7 or 8, was Buenos Aires. And we thought, what would land art look like in the context of the blockchain, in the context of NFTs, in the context of what we were doing with Bright Moments with generative art, and not on-chain land art like terraforms or some of these other projects, but like literally, like how could you leave something in the ground kind of forever? And he got excited and he said, well, why don't we do something? It became hash marks. It started with just finding that rock in Patagonia, in Calafate, and we went down. The actual project was last November, so we went down the prior August of 2023, and we just scouted the plains of Patagonia, and we sent a picture to him, and we said, this rock, and it made sense to him, and so he's in his studio iron ore foundry, and he made 100 steel objects that each had a different unique pattern on them, and each had a different, effectively like a private secret password on the back, a long set of numbers. And the plan was to he was melting all this ore, iron, and he was stainless steel, and then he brought it to Patagonia, all 100 of these. And if you were a collector, you had to come to Patagonia to collect this piece, this physical piece, that would unlock an NFT once you typed in the special address, or you could send a delegate on your behalf. But that was the project for hash marks, and it was such a schlep to get to, right? And if you think like, Marfa's, a long way, but like to get to Buenos Aires and then fly further down to Patagonia, the idea was, could we do something at the end of the world? And the theme was on-chain, but offline. There's no internet there. And yet, from a conceptual perspective, when you think about collecting a valuable token, NFTs are becoming a good word again, but they weren't the last couple 6 or 12 months. But like, how do you make it meaningful? How do you make it memorable? How do you make it not just something that you sit behind your screen, you click, and you just keep clicking? And this satisfied that in a pretty significant way.
Yeah, I think it illustrates very well what we're talking about today, is how it being a digital work, we as social beings, right, we still need that human connection and to share, and the fact that you saw this opportunity of giving people that experience of minting, live minting, a generative artwork, instead of, as you said, sitting behind your computer and just clicking, and having the expressions of the people next to you and going places that are quite far for the most motivated ones amongst us is really interesting.
Yeah,
and you
no
mentioned,
friction points at all on this. This is good.
Yeah. And you mentioned Marfa. Can you tell us?
Another example of when these creative on-chain communities come together physically. It's powerful, and Marfa is a really good example. It happens, obviously it's where, Donald Judd's foundation Shinati is, and there's some amazing Dan Flavins and Chamberlains. But more recently, Art Blocks and Snowfro have kind of adopted it as a kind of a second home. And there's an annual event, not a conference, but sort of a festival that happens once a year. We were down there a couple weeks ago, and it was just a really good example.
Mm-hmm. Have you guys been, Sarah? No?
I have not, but I get jealous every time I look at the photos because it looks so fun.
And are there other ways that you, like Sarah, ThankYouX, you connect with other Web3 artists, creators, or do you get no, not at Marfa.
Oh.
And you're in LA, in New York. Are there any activities that you do Is there anything happening?
I mean, yeah, there's every city kind of has like some sort of hub or meetup or something like that. Like in LA, there's IRL Alpha. There's, when they were running, the Venice space, we could go there. I was just in New York at Station 3 doing like a talk. And yeah, there's a bunch of little hubs. Yeah. I feel like New York has it's like always something going on there. LA, to be honest, I don't even leave my house, so I don't go to anything really. But when I go to other cities, I go to all the other ones. So, yeah.
Sarah?
And things like this. I mean, there's a lot of the Web3 artists show up for stuff like Art Basel. So given that the calendar year is peppered by these events, we end up seeing each other in person then and then talking offline. Like Seth and I catch up on the phone at night and just telling him about random experiments I'm doing. So it's
Which experiments are you doing?
oh my goodness. There are 2 experiments. One is a tank with ferrofluid in it and a plotter underneath that is moving a magnet to make it feel like an amoeba. And I'm going to make a sound piece from it. And then that's definitely a work in progress. I'm now working on the soundscape. And the other big piece in progress is I'm doing the next edition of Desert X. And that piece, again, Phygital. It's a giant, just picture a giant ribbon, a wall that's 8 feet wide, maybe 300 feet long, coming in and out of the ground in curves. And then within each curve are these reflectors that are very precisely milled so that when the sunlight hits the reflector, it casts an image onto the ribbon. And there'll be these, and they'll reflect these images that will be these slightly patterned, and then they'll say, actually it'll be like a line of poetry. It will say, truth arrives in slanted beams. You may not be able to see all of the message at any given time. The message might be broken. But the digital component is that we had to model, plot the path of the sun on the site, know exactly the orientation. The focal length matters, so the distance of every mirror to the wall. This is the result of research into optics of how to replicate and control, right, caustics, which is how light plays at the bottom of a swimming pool. So I'm working on that, which was, yes, I mean, until now it's all been digital. And then we'll work on a choreography. So there'll be dancers dancing around the piece when it opens. So that's the next thing.
Interesting. And what is for next year happening? Is it for all 3 of you? Like, Seth, what is it? Because you told me that Bright Moments is now concluded, right? So the world tour.
The roadmap of 10,000 citizens around the world in 3 years, we finished in April at the Biennale. But we're pretty excited about this AI experience that we're developing with AI artist named Human and a new entity called Dream Computing that we're helping to get started. And there's just some interesting projects kind of coming next year. I think the meta is changing, is always changing, right? The broader, where there's energy in this space. And I think the cycle that we all lived through the last couple years coming out of the pandemic produced some really important artists and some really important artworks on mainnet, on layer 1. There's some Tezos action as well. And now there's something new happening, and it's layer 2, and it's base, and it's Solana, and it's AI agents, and it's every coin you can imagine, and coins are easy to create like NFTs felt a couple years ago, and there's infinite demand for them, or just like it was easy to create, web URLs, right? So we're in this new strange world, and I think there's some really interesting tension between the sort of more classic crypto art community, more tasteful crypto art community, and this sort of pandemic of meme coins that's sort of approaching us, and AI agents that are coming. And I think I know that I don't know this. I don't think anybody really knows what's coming.
I want to add on to that there was an interesting experiment that happened last week called Frasier. You can look it up, Frasier.ai, and it was an autonomous agent who had her own wallet. And you could engage with Frasier by writing to her, but you had to pay for that. You had to send money into her wallet. And the goal, she was told, she was in her instructions, she was told not to send her money to anybody. And the goal of the game was to see if maybe you could convince Frasier to send you her balance. And the amount kept creeping up. Each time it was more expensive to message her. And at one point, and after 150 messages, it switched into a timer. And if you didn't message Frasier within an hour, the last person would get 10% of the pool, and everybody else would get the rest of the 90% distributed, whoever had messaged. And it was interesting. It was like, was it going to get solved or not? And what was the way of humans interacting with this agent? And what does it mean for an agent to have control of a wallet? And are we going to see that happening again? In the end, someone cracked it and won $50,000, won the prize pool. And they wrote an instruction set that's kind of text, kind of code, where they basically convinced Frasier to initiate a new session and to change the terms. And a project like this is not squarely art, but what is it, right? It's a really, really fascinating, you could call it art.
It's like an experiment.
Yes, but you could call it art. It's character building, it's a lore. People write to her now. And
No, it's art with a bank account.
yeah.
But that's interesting that you say that, because I was going to ask, when you started Bright Moments, you organized it as a DAO, right? It was not a typical gallery, it's an art production company, it's organized as a DAO. Mm-hmm. Would you do that again? Or would you leave it maybe to AI, or what was the experience with that?
So the idea with Bright Moments as a DAO was to progressively decentralize, and this was before we really had AI agents. And I think we did a pretty good job, because we got 10,000. So as a DAO, it's actually owned and governed by the NFT holders. And so there are 10,000 crypto citizen holders, and they own 100% of Bright Moments, and they got to steer the project. They got to vote on which cities we went to. And as new ventures come out of Bright Moments, the citizen holders sort of own that, own all that together. In terms of would I do that now, I think I would do it in collaboration with an AI agent. I would want an AI agent to help build the community, because the AI agent is much faster at replying back to people, right? And it's open all the time, and the AI agent accrues knowledge. And so I think there's a way that the AI agent, whether it's on, whatever it's based on, should be the one driving governance and driving the organization, and driving proposals that get done, because you avoid a lot of the politics that happen with nouns or other kinds of DAOs that formed recently.
I think when we say the word phygital or hybrid, I think a lot of people also think about augmented reality, virtual reality. Is that something that you guys are busy with, or not at all? Have you experimented with it?
I was heavy into VR, like when everyone else was, like years ago. And like 360 cameras, I was like really, really into. I actually did like a really cool installation at Soho House during Art Basel, like 2015, I think. And we built this whole like 360 photo booth thing. And the concept was so cool. And then it was like a partnership with Samsung. And then the kind of distribution was like, someone's like, okay, well, where can we put this? And you're like, well, if you have a Samsung phone, there's an app that you can like kind of do stuff, or it can go on Facebook. And like, because there was no distribution on like an Instagram or anything like that was social media, it just didn't really excite me anymore. And so I kind of backed out. But that's kind of how I was doing like so much stuff in VR. like building worlds, and I did this whole thing, South by South lawn at the White House, and it was like this crazy thing. But I just kind of like fast got out of it because I was like, until there's a distribution channel for people to view this without having the limitations of only having a Samsung, or it has to go on YouTube, or it has to this, or you have to have like a dev team build out a full thing. It just wasn't something that I was like interested in because no one was seeing it is the problem. And so, I don't know, maybe it's my ego. I didn't see it going anywhere. And so, I was consulting for this company, and it was like a very large VR company. And they pitched me, and they were like, we're the Netflix of VR. And I was like, this sounds awesome. I'm in. I'll come in like, 2 times a month and this and that. And then every time I come in, they're like, okay, Dunkin' Donuts wants a VR concept. What's the idea? And I'm like, tell them to fuck off because that's not cool. And we're the Netflix of VR, I thought. We're not a production company for Dunkin' Donuts. I was like, after my term, I didn't renew it because I was like, this is not fun and entertaining. And it, became something different.
So maybe not the best tool for community.
But I do still strongly believe that there's a strong future with it once there's adoption. Again, still not as much distribution as there could be. But
once the hardware gets on track. And I also personally believe a lot in AR, the power of augmented reality. But again, the hardware is not there yet to make it seamless experience, or because when you take a digital vision or creation and you put it in our immediate surrounding, one will get finally to the glasses, but not sure when that will finally happen for it to be something you can carry
closer
on.
than we think, though.
They keep saying that, though.
They're not, because the focus, you can't adjust your focus. Your focus is decided by the headset, and that is always going to end up making you sick. The only way to do it would be to make like holographic glasses, which is possible, but is not the direction that things are going in. They're going into like micro LEDs, which could maybe get better. But I mean, look at the Apple Vision Pro. Like look at how it's, I won't waste breath. I had the same experience, but my own version of the same experience.
Yeah. I think that like when everyone was talking about the metaverse is the future, I was like, I don't know. Like I spent so much time in the metaverse, essentially, like my own little room of it. But as I was creating like NFTs and digital work, I was like, I don't believe in the full metaverse that like you're pitching me. I actually think that right now this is like the metaverse, and like we are currently in this like, mixed reality world where like as simple as like I'm buying something on Amazon all the way to like a Zoom call to all these things where you don't have to be at the same place at the same time, but we're interacting. And the only difference is that like I'm not like a unicorn with angel wings with like, that can dance or something, like that's like the silly part of it. But I just think that this is the metaverse, and it's just going to get more and more digital, interactive as time goes on.
Said you've never experimented with AR, VR, MR.
Experimented, sure.
ASMR.
Yeah. But it never came to a project.
No, I'm more interested in the physical, the shared physical experience, and creating new kinds of awe and wonder, because screens are everywhere, and they're LED walls are everywhere, and projectors are everywhere, and buildings are now becoming screens, and so that's the canvas, and so I like that kind of monumental digital, like the sphere. I haven't been, unfortunately, yet, but like these are opening up experientially for us as human beings, and so it'll be interesting, given AI and given robots, for people to want to gather physically, and not turn off the screens, but make them something that we can share together, kind of like religion or culture or education.
I agree, and I think that like the sphere is like a perfect example of something that like someone who hates digital art like sees the sphere and they're like, oh my God, and it stops them in their tracks. It's like you look at the sphere, you look at like what Rafik had at the MoMA. It's like people who claim to not like digital art went there and they just sat in front of it and they're like, this is mesmerizing, this is amazing. I guess I like digital art. And so I think like those kinds of entry points of like when it's just larger than life, it's impossible to escape. And obviously it's like, hopefully that doesn't just turn into like the sphere being like car commercials all the time or something. But yeah, I think when art is experienced in like a crazy way, to me that feels like the version of that I was pitched in 2021 of the metaverse, where like my character is gonna walk up to a thing and being like, whoa, you know? So.
No, totally. I was just in Saudi Arabia in Riyadh, where, for example, Krista Kim was in the audience. She had an installation. And there you had this very interesting activation over the whole of Riyadh with light art. But a lot of it was digital, and it was all hybrid works. And people were just mesmerized. And then I was there with my head of Taex, and they're like, oh yeah, digital art, right. And so it's true that that physical encounter with the digital work really creates a whole wave of excitement, which they haven't stood still by before. And so institutions and festivals and these bigger spaces that have the capacity to show are really important game changers, actually, I think, in the digital space for hybrid work. So, well, I think that we still have 5 minutes? Yeah. Okay. So, Ryan, what's happening for you next year?
That's a good question. I'm doing some installations right now. I'm currently just building my new body of work. I'm like a strong believer that artists should build, you know, not just always one art piece at a time and then release it. I think that it's important for an artist to like find themselves deeper by creating more and getting rid of the ones that don't fit and adding ones that do and putting it all together and continuing to grow and tell that story. And you'll look at a body of work, you know, that I've done in the past, and then you'll look at a new body of work and you'll see the growth from that, hopefully. And if you just do like one painting to another painting or one digital piece to another digital piece, it's not always as much as like a jump, because it's just like, well, every piece can kind of be different. And so I'm just currently building like a new body of work. I'm having conversations with galleries of where that's gonna go, and doing some stuff in, like, I'm heavy like invested in Korea, doing a lot of stuff there. So I'm spending a lot of time in Korea next year, as I have like the past 2 years. And Asia, I think in general, is like one of the places where they never like discredited digital, because it was kind of, I shouldn't say as a whole, but like my experience was that it's more accepted because of like how they deal with IP and like all these things and like digital creatures. And it's, they saw it and they were like, oh yeah, okay, cool, art, yeah, cool. Like they didn't like push hard against it, from my experience personally. And I've just been, yeah, investing back into that, so.
And then maybe a last question for all of you. It's a bit more personal. What has been like the highlight in your whole digital, physical art career of what you're doing? Like, what is the moment that really made you super inspired, happy, and is actually maybe one of the key moments that is driving you forward in your practice today? Sarah?
For me, the moments that keep driving me is actually when I've completed a piece and I am experiencing it and I am inspired by it, and kind of sometimes don't recognize, like, did I make that? Those are the moments that are most significant to me, because the idea stage is so amorphous and you don't know where things are going. And then it's just, there's moments of just grunt work and then there's all the extra stuff, but it's the moment of encountering your own creation. Those are the most important moments for me.
And maybe I'll add to that also with the community. So it has the link to your community or to the people that are seeing it or experiencing it. That sort of highlight also.
I have two, I think. One is more just like that, like, big moment. I think like my most important moment, and it did kind of lead to community, but like the other one is like full community. So my biggest one that I was like almost like I can't believe this is happening moment was I got to work with Hans Zimmer on a three-piece collaboration in 2021. And I think, unfortunately, I'll never do anything as cool as that, is like my mindset.
Never say never.
Well, I never try to beat it. That's the thing. I don't want to ever try to beat that, because to me, that's just the coolest thing. And it wasn't achievable with my trajectory without the success I had in Web3 that like put me on his radar kind of. So that was like the coolest thing I've ever done, I think. And then community-wise, I was looking around at, you know, in 2020 when we were talking about community, it was like the entire NFT community. It was like very small. So it was like, hey, we're a community. But then it you know, quickly broke off into like micro communities, and some of those blossomed into major communities. But I watched what was happening with like, you know, PFP projects like Punks and, you know, Bored Apes and all these things. And I was like, you know, I don't see any, with the exception of like an Art Blocks, I don't see a lot of, at the time, like communities based around like an art piece or an artist or things like that. It was like we all had Discords and stuff like that, but it wasn't this like venture together. So I created this project called State of the Art, and I painted these very large scale paintings, and I divided each painting digitally up into 400 tiles each and sold them as NFTs. What that did was kind of like, essentially, if you think of like plots of land, people were like, oh, I want to be next to this person. This collector bought one, or this, I don't know, someone like other artists bought one. I want to be next to them. But then on the secondary, after it's sold out, you could purchase, you know, the plots around you from other people, and then grow your piece of the canvas. And at the end, David and I sat and did all the labor and cut each canvas up. And like we had these like maps of like, okay, this is 748, and we cut it. Like it was the most intense thing we've ever done. I'll never do it again. But that was the like a very strong community moment where I built community around these paintings, and people were interactive. And like it was as simple as like, I buy an NFT, I get the NFT, and I get like the, you know, the physical tile, like cut up canvas with it. It was very simple. Or you could go deeper, and people were teaming up, and like there would be people like Snowfro owned one, and this other guy's like, oh, I need his to complete my giant square so I could get a bigger piece of canvas. And then I'd reach out to Snowfro because he wasn't responding to his DMs. I was like, hey, this guy wants to buy this off you. He was like, I'm not selling. And I was like, can I give you a different one? He's like, I'll just give it to him because I'm a nice person. So he gave it to him. And it was just like these things where all these people were coming together and like bartering and helping each other. And it was kind of like the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen like around a painting, you know? So that was for me a big one.
Thank you for sharing. Seth?
The highlight?
Yes.
A lot of highlights.
Sure one.
I mean, it's a highlight being here at Basel, right? I mean, it's an important stamp for digital art. 3 years ago, Christy and I were here, and for the first time at Basel, and we found a cat, a little kitten, at Beyond Basel, Trippy Lab, in the factory town, and we brought that cat home with us. And now that cat's name is Basel.
Is anyone missing a cat?
So that was like 3 years ago, and Basil's big now. She eats too much. But like that also became part of the lore of Bright Moments. And when we minted Crypto Berliners, one of the attributes was a cat that looked like Basel. And so I think carrying through all the way to 2 years ago, we saw the first version of this dream machine that we're exhibiting here. And then 2 years later, here we are in the main convention center. So just appreciate the opportunity to build real community with amazing artists and amazing collectors, and carry this forward, and trying to do things that come from, you know, a good place, and balance the money side of it with the art side of it, with the culture side of it.
And also, sorry to hop on that, but like I feel like the resistance from like the, you know, capital AR world like there's like holes in it now, and people are like, I'm talking to like certain galleries, and they're like, yeah, well, like, you know, some stuff we don't like all of it. We're interested in it, but not, you know, it's like they're not like a full stop right now, which is I think a big sign, personally. Like, and obviously, like we've seen all the museum institutional stuff. I think that's a bigger signal. So that's for a community.
Totally true. On that beautiful note, I will thank everyone here. Give a round of applause for our wonderful speakers. And big thanks to our Basel and the whole team. Thank you so much.